And all right, and with that, our LinkedIn stream is live. Our YouTube stream is live, I believe. And as you can see, we have Raghavendra with us. So let me introduce the session. Hello, welcome to everyone to Secrets to Building World-Class Products, Strategies for Becoming a World-Class Developer in 2022. Our guest today is Raghavendra Gandadi, who is Director of Technology for Cimpress. He'll tell you a little more about himself after I introduce him, but first let me let you know about the Q&A box in WebEx. Please put your questions for Raghavendra there. You do have the option to chat to all panelists. Tend to log the questions in for the Q&A segment of the webinar toward the end, and that's the best place to put them. We're also going to ask you a couple of questions today toward the beginning and end of the session. So let's start with this one. If you're watching live through WebEx, you can see the poll widget. If not, if you're on the streaming service, you can answer in the comments. Basically, we just want to get a feeling for how experienced our audience is. And we're also checking in on how you're feeling today. We've been checking in with folks during the pandemic because of the rising and falling surges and the opening and closing of businesses. So just like to get a kind of well-being check. And we'll close the poll in about 3 seconds. Here's the result. And it's kind of a bimodal distribution in our audience for Raghavendra. We have about half of our audience are folks who are still in school, but the next largest group are people with more than 5 years of experience. So this will be an interesting session. And it's good to see that over 90% of the folks checked in saying they're doing well or doing okay. So we hope this will improve the outlook for everyone else. And with that, I'm going to introduce Raghavendra Gandadi, the Director of Technology at Cimpress, who has around 20 years of experience in the design and development of software systems. Most recently, before Cimpress, he was the head of software development at Tesco. He is a passionate advocate for best practices in engineering and software development, and I'll let him tell a little bit more about himself now as he starts his discussion. Welcome, Raghavendra.
Hi, thank you, Stuart, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining this session. About myself, I think Stuart has pretty much summarized it well. I have been with Cimpress for the past 5 months. Before that, I was at Tesco. And over the last 20 or close to 20 years, I've worked on various various facets of software development, various kinds of products, some enterprise products, some implementation of in-house solutions. And currently, my team is building an interesting product. It's called the Logo Maker. Essentially, it's a product that allows a user to build logos with some very simple inputs. And anyways, I think I'm going to reference that a few times here and there as I go through the conversation. All right, so let's get started. The topic of the session essentially is about world-class products, but also more importantly about becoming a world-class developer. I'll try and kind of talk about the products first, and there's a strong correlation between that and those who build those products, which is world-class developers such as yourselves, right? Typically, right, I think there's a lot of interesting thing when it comes to talking about products. There has been some really good products. As you look around, there have been products that look great but somehow did not click. There have been some really poor products as well, right? And typically, I wouldn't say there is a secret formula that says, hey, you do this, if this is how the product should be, and so on. However, let me rephrase that. There is no, how do I say this? There's no recipe to say that, okay, you do this and this will become a great product, right? However, there are certain processes, there are certain things that you could trust to build a great product. And I think that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit, right? One of the most important things really when you're building a product is to stay and to be grounded to the space of the problem. A lot of times what happens is you try to work backwards from a solution and say, okay, now let me try and this is the solution I have, and let me try and solve a problem related to that. There are some scenarios where that works, but usually that's not the right direction of travel. So stay in the problem space. Do you know what is a problem you're solving? Your product, the product that you're looking to build, what is it? What is the problem it is solving? Why build this? Why now? And things like that. uh, so it's important to get to a state where you're building the right thing before you're building the thing right. Building the thing right is about the process of how you're building it. But make sure that the problem that you're solving, you are aware of it. Now, in some cases, of course, the problem statement itself could be that, okay, we are trying to discover some things, discover a need. So this is a general area we would like to operate. And my instant thing is really, I want to understand what are the problems and so on, which is also okay, right? In that case, your approach will change a little bit. It will be more experimental. It will be more about understanding your customers. It's going to be about understanding the market and the product fitment and so on, which is perfectly fine. But it's important that you are aware what you're doing it, what you're after, because the way you would approach in certain things in the way you would approach would change it, right? Especially if you are if you're still discovering, right? I think you need to be extremely quick in pivoting, and you need to give a lot of importance to feedback and things like that. You have to do that even otherwise, but it's just the relative importance that you give to those sort of shifts, right? So yeah, and I think that's where stay at the problem space, be clear about the problem you're solving. To quote Albert Einstein, again, I'm not sure if it was him, but this is what I read. Essentially, there's a quotation that says, if I have 10 hours to solve the problem, I would spend like 9 hours defining it, or a majority of the time defining what the problem is, right? Because once you do that, the solution becomes apparent. Uh, it's not always that proportion, but the spirit of that is be clear about what you're solving. Now, I mean, and you can look around for inspiration or look around for anecdotes, right? I mean, there's some really great products which essentially what they have done is find what, like there are a number of different things to be done, but they found that one little pain point and solved it, iterated over it, and eventually built a great product. A simple example that comes to mind is when Facebook introduced the photo tagging. It was an experimental thing. A few engineers worked on it, and the release date, they got good feedback, and they kind of built on it. And soon after, right, it was a very, very successful product that it did. Likewise, there are a lot of products that have not done well either, and that's perfectly fine, right? So we'll talk about that in a little bit, right? So understand the problem, and then something very related to that is understand the customers, right? Understand who your users who are going to use your product. Now, there's a little bit of a disambiguation required here because I'm using product in a slightly broader context, right? Not all software development is pure product in the sense that there's going to be a external customer using it, right? There are some great products where the users are perhaps your colleagues, or it could be certain operators in your warehouse and so on, right? And those are also really, really valid and really perfect use cases, but they're not necessarily product from a standard or from a well understood terminology standpoint. Right? So I'm using product in a broader context. Any software that we are building, I'm kind of putting that as a product here, right? And again, if you follow these, right, the likelihood of you building a great product is high, right? The next thing that once you know what you're building, right, even then you cannot always be 100% sure that this is the right thing, right? So it's important to iterate and iterate fast and repeat the process, right? So it's all about, hey, you form an hypothesis that this is the problem that we'd like to solve. You try and put something together, a prototype perhaps, or something simple, try it out, give it to the hands of your users, get the feedback, and see how it looks. And then you could choose which way to proceed, right? Whether you want to double down or whether you want to make some modifications and things like that, right? At the end of the day, right, this is the spirit of the agile development methodology. It essentially makes room for changes. The changes are typically where when you learn more about your customers, when you learn more about what problem you're solving, you reprioritize and you sort of shuffle accordingly instead of sticking to a plan and then building something that no one is willing to use, right? So yeah, so it's very important to get things to the hands of the customers, to the hands of your users as soon as possible. And while you're building, you accept the fact that you may get a few things wrong, which is okay, right? But you got to fail fast so that you could sort of course correct faster and move fast, right? And establishing this sort of a culture sometimes takes time, right? It's not always straightforward. In some cases it is, in some cases it's not. And I think a lot of it also depends on what you're building. For example, if it's let's say it's a fairly well defined thing, right? Maybe you're doing a migration of something, and you pretty much know what you're going to build over the next 1 year. Maybe there are few variations in the new system, but you have a general idea, right? Now these kind of systems typically have a medium room for experimentation. There are not too many things that you could experiment with because you're fairly clear about what is it that you're building. uh, and what I see often is such systems. There is this there's a constant struggle in the sense that you want to be agile, you want to follow the Scrum and those methodologies, and for those in the universities here, it's essentially agile principles. It's a methodology essentially that allows you to take small iterations, and instead of having a big plan of uh, delivering everything in a year, it breaks it down into smaller iterations, and there are certain principles that guide that acts as guiding principle on how you make it successful. Yeah. So essentially, what I've seen is even these well-defined products, they sort of follow agile, but they're not really agile in the sense that there's a project plan that says 3 months of development, and those developments are in iterations, and then there is an integration test phase and so on, right? And here is where I would get a little bit on having the right practice, right? The next statement may be a bit debated, but personally I am not a fan of that methodology, right? What I would like to see is, as soon as we have something, it's integrated in the production environment or in the real environment. Yes, we could turn it off for the users and things like that, but we do integrations, we build the products gradually, and instead of having a big bang at the end, right? Now, anyway, so I think I probably deviated a little bit here, but that's one set of products. Again, even though they are well defined, I think following the right agile practices would really solve some of the burdens that we face. Now, the other nature of products is something which is a bit ambiguous. The problem space. You know that this is what we are trying to solve, and we do not have the solution yet, but you know the shape of the solution. You know that the solution looks something like this. And to me, these are this is some really exciting products to build. And in fact, I mentioned about Logo Maker earlier. It sort of falls in this. We know that we would like to build a world-class do-it-yourself logo maker where the customers can come and with some simple interactions, we kind of come up with some really beautiful and relevant logos, right? So we know that that's the problem we're trying to solve. But then there are nuances, right? What do the customers like? What kind of designs look good? How do you define the quality of the logos? Because it's extremely subjective. And how do you know what will the customers like? Very often, what I like may not be the same as what the customers like. And all these kind of ambiguous nature really makes way for some exciting phase of product development, right? So it is extremely important in such scenarios to bake in experimentation as a part of your process, right? As in, you're building the product by running a lot of little experiments and seeing how it works, what works well, and you pivot accordingly. And again, mind you, these are not like, mindless experiments or just some random experiments, right? The typical thing where you observe something, you form a hypothesis, then you sort of implement something real quick, test it, and based on what you observe, you go to the next step, right? And this essentially gives a sense of the evolution of a product, right? It's you do something simple and you evolve, you adjust based on the market needs, based on what the customers want, and you evolve it. So those are some of, if you look at some of the great products, that is roughly how it would have evolved, give or take a few details, right? And the good thing for me, from my perspective, is that the successful ones essentially nurture a culture of co-creation, right? It's not about a set of instructions that comes in from someone, this is how the product needs to be. It's about defining a vision and going after it, defining a problem statement, exploring it, and then having a conversation about how do we solve that problem. And generally, right, there's a lot of excitement. And I would think, if you kind of define and set up your problem in this fashion, set up your product objective in this fashion, and you follow this approach, right? The approach of experimentation, the approach of being nimble, the approach of having a co-creation sort of an environment. There is a very strong chance that you will evolve it into a really great product, because you're sort of doing all the right things. It's like you're sculpting the product, and you have everyone doing the right things there, right? So for me, I think this is the crux of building a world-class product, right? Understand the problem, define it, have this practice, have this process of, just staying focused on it and continually adjusting, and build a team and build a culture of experimentation and just doing the right things. This will eventually lead into some really good products. Now, I want to do I want to sort of have a segue between that to multiple times I mentioned about creation, co-creation, and so on, and I feel that's where it transitions into how do you become a world-class developer, right? And this is where the question really for you is, as a developer, would you want to be someone who takes instructions, so to speak, or are you a creator, right? In the sense that, do you want to be someone who is being told? It could be by business, it could be by product manager, it could be by someone, uh, in the sense, hey, I want you to do this. This is the problem. This is like, this is a solution, you implement it this way. So do you want to be an implementer of it, or do you want to be a co-creator? Do you want to be someone who has a participation in how the product evolves? And for me, the best developers that I have seen have the mindset for the latter, right? So you're not just taking instructions, you're really trying to contribute to the product. And I think that that really is a hallmark of one of the hallmarks of how someone could be a great developer. And this is, across this again, even though I'm talking about a product which is, evolving and so on, the statement is true. Even if your product is not like that, even if your product is much simpler, much straightforward, even there is an opportunity for you to contribute in the creation of it, in the way that there are things that could be done better. And I think you should. My advice would be, as a developer, or as any team player in the team, to look for how you could contribute in creating the solution. And I think that's what's going to set you apart and really take you to the next level. All right. So moving on, again, so I would just move on to the so how do you be to essentially the traits of a world-class developers, right? And one thing I've already mentioned, which is about how could you be co-creator. But then a lot of times, I think there's a good chance that some of you might be thinking about that, which is around, hey, I have these ideas, I want things to be done, but maybe my manager is not listening to me, or maybe no one in the team listens to me, or something like that, right? And it's quite possible, right? In a dynamic work environment, sometimes it could happen, especially if the culture of the team is not that evolved, right? And not that evolved to be inclusive and things like that, right? And and to an extent, right? I think there are things that you could do, and it's in your hands to build credibility, right? And in from what I can say, right, if I trace back to some of the great developers that I have worked with, or even the time when, let's say, I felt I did something really wonderful. One of the biggest things that comes to mind is about showing bias to action, right? It's one thing to keep talking about things, but it's a different thing to take an initiative and do something. Again, don't get me wrong. I'm not necessarily saying that, hey, solve the whole thing, or stretch beyond your time and put work 20 hours a day and put something, right. That's not what I'm referring to, right. I'm just referring to that little nudge about, hey, maybe you could just build a little prototype, and or you see something, it could be a small problem, you see that lying around, and you take action. You show bias to action. Instead of talking about it, you do something about it. It could be it could be a very small act, but I think that's where it starts, right? Showing a bias to action is probably one of the significant contributors for someone to build credibility. And once you build credibility, your ability and the strength of your influence automatically improves, right? And again, that's what it's all about. If you're co-creating, you got to be able to influence your ideas. You got to be able to present your ideas in a way that can be accepted, and of course, it has to be the right idea in the first place. And you do that by building credibility, right? So yeah, I mean, show bias to action, and I would say just take initiative, right? Don't wait. Don't you got to stop asking for permission or seeking permission, right? If there's an opportunity, just go for it, right? And this is how eventually you build your personal brand, right? Uh, so yeah, so just to summarize, right, seek that joy of creation, seek that space where you could co-create, and seek that and build your credibility, right? And build your credibility by showing bias to action, by picking simple things. Now, in the past, when I have mentioned this, I have heard responses on the lines of, hey, I do show my bias to action, but I'm not appreciated, I'm still not being recognized, and things like that, right? Or I'm still not able to build my credibility, I'm still, nobody listens to me. It could happen, right? And again, there are various reasons, right? It could have to do with you're not at reached that stage where it's strong enough. I would still say, just keep working at it, right? You will crack it, right? It's just a matter of time. And at the end of the day, it's not about that one job or one project, right? It's about you It's about how you how you show up essentially, right? And typically, if you once you hone that ability, it stays with you, right? It becomes a part of you, and irrespective, if it doesn't work in one environment, it will work in another environment, right? So yeah, just don't shy away from it. At the end of the day, by doing this, you're obviously helping your organization, you're obviously helping your product, everything, but you're also helping yourself. You're building your own capability, and so yeah. So just take ownership and act, right? Uh, the next set of things, I would talk about is about your mindset, right? Again, don't be afraid to be wrong, uh, and also don't be afraid to admit that you're wrong. And again, I have heard of that certain environments this may not work very well, so your mileage may vary. But as a general principle, right? So the more vocally self-critical you are, uh, it again helps with building credibility, right? It helps in building. It clearly demonstrates that while you have your strong opinions, you're also not afraid to admit that you're wrong, which further builds the credibility, because if you've done something wrong, you'll be the first one to raise hand and say, "Oops, that was not right." Again, it's usually important to have. It is important to have that psychological safety around it that enables it. But again, it's uh, and if you do not have an environment where you could do it, there's something wrong with the culture there, right? Again, take your right judgment call, but what I have seen works well most is when you embrace this mindset, right? Because now you're not dependent on anything, right? You are self-aware, and I think that kind of helps in taking you a long way, right? You hold yourself accountable to others, right? So and that sort of really again shows you in a very good light, right? Because uh, of course others can point out a mistake, but you'll be the first to point out your own mistake, and that sort of grounds you, but also elevates you in a very paradoxical sense, right? uh, and I know a lot of these things that I talked about is about behaviors, but then another important thing, and I'm not specifically talked about technology, but and that's what I'm going to do right now. So keep learning new things, right? And of course, there are various forums to learn. Could be little webinars like this, but of course, this is going to be a very high level. I'm going to talk about a few things, but then find mechanisms where you could learn about the things that you like, things that you would enjoy. There are in the current world, I think there are a lot of good sources available, including Simplilearn. And there are so many other sources available for you to pick things and learn, right? So and that's again, the more you know, the more you learn about things, the more variations, the more range of things that you are aware of, that you learn. It eventually helps you in the first point when we talked about solving a problem. It opens up your mind in for various ways in which a given problem could be solved, right? So and again, it helps you with building your credibility. Another important thing I would say is, relentlessly collaborate with people around you, network and collaborate with them, right? The people, your colleagues, and your stakeholders, be it anyone, right? Collaborate with them and genuinely care about them, right? So genuinely care about the people that you work with, because I think subconsciously we see through fake um, things, right? If somebody is faking that the care, you eventually see through it, right? So the right thing really is to genuinely care about them, and what it translates here is about having the right empathy, supporting your colleagues when they need help. And the support could come in various formats, right? It could come in if someone is struggling with something, you could offer a helping hand, or it could be something else. Everyone is different, but show that you genuinely care about people, right? And uh, collaborate with with all your stakeholders with open mind. And I think this really will help in you growing as an engineer, growing as a as a developer. Related to that is about have a growth mindset, which is about essentially seek for feedback and accept feedback. I think there's a really beautiful someone has put it very beautifully, which is about feedback is a gift, right? And especially when someone is giving you a critical feedback or a feedback about something that is not easy, you should appreciate that even more, because it's not easy to give difficult feedback. Now, whether you agree with that or not is secondary, right? The primary thing is be open to feedback and seek for feedback, and any feedback, do not dismiss it, right? It has something behind that. And this essentially will give you more data points and inputs about how you would like to improve yourself, right? And the more you know, the more you see. If not anything else, even if it's a conjecture, even if it's not a fact, it will still allow you to work on your empathy. Because if so and so is concluding this about me, there's something wrong that I'm doing, or there's something about the way I come across is not right. So let me work on it, right? So I mean, I'm just talking about the extreme scenario where you do not agree with the feedback, and of course, if you agree with the feedback, even better. There's something that you could work on. This does not mean that you blindly agree with every feedback. You got to apply your own thought process around it, and if you're not sure, seek your mentor's input on that, right? Hey, this is what the feedback I'm getting. What do you think, right? And bounce off those thought, and you'll get the right input. But essentially, the underlying comment here is about having a growth mindset, right? And being emotionally honest about about yourself, being candid in receiving feedback, and also being candid in giving feedback, right? Giving and receiving feedback is one of the most critical things that you could learn as a professional. And if you're already great at it, kudos. I'm just show off. I mean, I think I'm still learning, right? I gotten good at some part of it, but I'm still learning. I still have a long way to go, because it's there's so much to it. So I would say, what I would advise is, if you are already good at it, great, keep working on it. And if you're not, really think about it, right? How you could give a good feedback to others, and how you could essentially have the right frame of mind to receive valuable feedback. Again, not to go too deep into it, but there are certain things, right, about especially when you're giving critical feedback. Remember that the feedback is not about the person; it's about something that the person did, and it's very important to differentiate the two. Else, it will not be candid anymore. It just becomes personal, and the odds of someone listening to your feedback just drops drastically, right? And hence, I'm saying it's a craft. It's something that you get better at. What I would strongly suggest you do not is, stop be very genuine in the feedback, right? It's I would say it's better to not give any feedback than give an incorrect feedback, give a false feedback, sugarcoat it just for the sake of it, or give a feedback which absolutely does not do anything. It's not very useful, right? Anyways, I will not detail much further about feedback, but I would strongly recommend learn more about giving and receiving feedback, right? Yeah, and the other thing you could do essentially is, connect and surround yourself with folks who are better than you. If not in everything, maybe certain things. You don't always have to be the smartest person in the room, right? It's valuable for you if there are folks who are equally or more smarter than you, which is an opportunity to learn. And I think a lot of my experience, I mean, I could vouch for that, right? And learning is not necessarily just from, it's not always from seniors, right? I mean, there are times that I learned a lot from someone who who joined the team or who started working very recently, right? You got to have an open mind and to sort of really listen what they say. Anyways, yeah, surround yourself with really smart people and try who are better than you, and you're gonna position yourself very well when you do that. The other thing, I guess, a typical thing that I like, in the several years that we have been giving feedback, right? One of the things that usually comes up quite often is about communication. Like poor communication is an input given, but then communication obviously means a lot of things. It's not just about being talkative or speaking is one way of it, but then it's not just about that, right? Communication could mean there are a lot of different ways. Even just because someone is an introvert does not mean that they are not good communicators, right? I know a lot of people who are by nature not outspoken per se, not they're sort of a little introverted, but they're excellent communicators, right? So communication, so let's not mix communication with that, right? um, Again, it's a very broad thing, right? But recognize the need to communicate, right? Uh, First of all, right, at the fundamental level, right? If you do not communicate, if you do not speak up, no one can read your mind, right? Very, very, very few people are good at that. In general, I think it's safe to assume that if you do not speak up about something, the odds are there that they do not have the same thing that is in your mind. And I can give multiple examples, but one significant example that comes to my mind is there's one aspiration that I had. And this was way, like almost 17, 18 years ago. And that was not happening. And I went to kind of confront my manager and I said, hey, this is not happening. Is there something wrong with the way I'm doing things? And the only feedback I got from managers, oh, okay, I never realized that you had that aspiration. I did because you never told me about it, right? So let me work on it. And as soon as I had the conversation, very shortly, things worked out, right? And I was in this space where I was like, hey, why is this not happening? Why is this not happening? And the mistake I did there was I never communicated. I assumed that my manager in that case would know what I want, right? And yeah, don't do that mistake, right? If there is anything that you want, speak up and verbalize it. Just make sure that you're communicating about it and letting someone know that, hey, this is what you have in mind, right? uh, and communicate up and wide, right? As in, communications, you communicate with your managers, you communicate with your peers, with your stakeholders and everyone. So simple thumb rule, right? Don't assume that people can read your mind. They definitely cannot, right? So just find the right communication thing there, right? All right. And I think I would sort of start wrapping this up a little bit here, right? One of the things that, again, these are a few things that what I spoke about is things that I value in developers. Uh, to me, one of the most important things is integrity, and you saw how I was talking about genuine feedback, genuinely care about people, and take feedback with open mind, communicate, all the things, right? And eventually, all this to me, it comes with it comes to the point of having a very strong integrity, right? And I've seen the people who have very strong integrity are the ones who have seen like immense success. Uh, Mean what you say, right? I mean, don't hide behind the political correctness. Be very straightforward, right? Again, some of it comes to about feedback and so on, right? There are times when you uh, especially the difficult conversations, right? You try to have it in a way where you make it non-confrontational for all right reasons. But then, if the message is not clearly communicated across, then you try to use political correctness or you sugarcoat the feedback or the message. You're actually doing a harm rather than good, right? So be very clear, mean what you say, and again, so it's not just about the saying, also about in other things, right? If you say something, do it, right? Don't get into this about, hey, but I did not say that. if even though you have said something, and never get into this business of, okay, hey, there is no proof of it, so now I can play it the other way, right? Don't do that. I mean, it's a short-term win but a long-term loss, right? You won't get away with that for too long. Maybe in this one situation you will get away, but very soon it will chase you, right? So I think integrity is one of the most important things that you could have as a developer, probably not just as a developer, as a professional, right? Professional integrity. To me, it's at the top of one of the top things that I would look for and I would value. And let your principles guide you, right? In terms of of course we all have our own value systems, but then let that guide you in terms of how you want to approach the situation. And if you have strong set of principles and strong integrity, you will do the right thing. And that's what culminates into be genuine, right? If you're genuine in this in various situations, the right version of you comes out, right? And that's brilliant. uh, with that, I think maybe I'll probably just talk about I've spoken a lot about the things that you do. I would just talk about a couple of things that I think you should not do, right? There's one a very interesting thing. It's very common. It's very uh, natural for a lot of us to assume uh, malice, right? Saying that, hey, this person, we call it the office politics and so on. Uh, I would not say that the office politics does not exist. Probably does in some pockets, but I think it is given more credit than it deserves, right? In the sense that there are a lot of things that is just simple dynamics and that's attributed to malice, that's attributed to politics and so on. And I think that's not the case, right? I mean, in fact, there is this thing called Hanlon's razor, which quotes never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity. Uh, you know, in general, people are not scheming things. Of course, there may be an exception, right? So if something goes wrong, it's probably they were stupid enough to not see something, right? Of course, there are exceptions. I know I'm guessing that unfortunately some of you might have been impacted uh, by this, and if and genuinely so, so it could happen. But I would say that's not necessarily the default, right? So don't be in that in that victim frame that you're being targeted. The odds of that is low. It could happen, but it's low, right? And hence, do not be cynical or vindictive or manipulative or revengeful in your approach. It's not worth it. I mean, even if somebody has screwed with you or whatever, right? It's it's not worth being cynical, right? Even you could either fix things, or you could just move on with it. Now, this comes with a bit of a pinch of salt. I know there are situations or there are certain personal values which could be different from it. That's okay, right? But in general, right? Yeah. So don't be in that victim frame. There are a lot of just if you don't like the things that are going on, if things are too negative around you, I would say just change the environment, right? And lastly, right, well, all these things said and done, work life balance and or work life integration, as it's called right now, is extremely important. Don't work too hard. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint, right? You got years and years and years of things to be done. Take care of your health. Find some things to do outside of your work, right? So yeah, just remember that work is not everything. It's an extremely important part of your life, but it's not everything. So yeah, I mean, work-life balance is important, right? And seek that, and even if you can work more, just see where you want to draw the line, and have that right balance. So yeah, so I think those are some of the things that I value, and I've seen some really accomplished developers with these behaviors, with these kind of mindset. And I hope this was helpful. Some of it might be repeat because it's you would have probably heard it in from different forums, but I could vouch for the things that I just described here. With that, Stuart, over to you. Thanks everyone for listening.
Great. We can go into questions and answers. That was a really great talk, Raghavendra. We had a lot of comments coming in about how helpful that was to folks. And just taking a look at my screen here. We've got Wade who asks, how did somebody get started in software development? Not necessarily, I think his question is not necessarily how do you get started as a software developer, but how do you decide where to start when you're developing a software product?
Oh, let me see if I understood the question correctly. It's more about, is the question more around when do you actually start writing code and start building software for something? Do you think is that the spirit of the question?
I think the spirit of the question, yeah, is when you're working on a product, where do you start, you know, approaching the problem, and
Yeah.
what steps do you start with?
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting thing, right? Because I did speak quite a bit about understanding the problem and so on, but then I also spoke about bias to action, which is a bit contrary in the sense that what you do not want to do is just even though it is important to define the problem, absolutely. What you should not be doing is, I think there's a term called analysis paralysis, right? Where you keep thinking about it and so on, right? And I guess the balance, right? You continue to define the problem, right? You don't stop there until you have the right problem definition. At the same time, as soon as you have something that feels good enough, right? You could start prototyping it, right? You could start sort of building things out so that you could learn more about it, right? As in, let's say something as simple as let's say uh, we have this problem. We think this sort of a website or this sort of app will solve the problem, right? While the problem discovery is happening, you could form a hypothesis around, hey, this looks like this is the way we could solve the problem. It is very useful to build a quick and dirty prototype. Low fidelity prototype is perfectly fine, but then you have started, right? So you have started the chain of iterations, right? Uh, what I meant earlier by about be driven by the problem is that don't let the solution then drive the problem. So that is the difference, right? Uh, Stay focused on the problem, but then I would say start building as early as possible. Uh, Recognizing that the early stages, the purpose of what you build early is a bit different from something down the line, right? The purpose here is to learn more about it, to discover more about the problem, or maybe to just prove or disprove some hypothesis, right? So I think that's where you would start, and then I think it leads into the design and technology choices as well. And in the longer run, it is important to choose the right technology. It is important to use the right stack and everything, but then don't get bogged down by it, right? So even and that's why I would just point to the point to the note of bias to action. I would say whatever the earliest opportunity to start putting something together, I think it would be good to start doing it, recognizing that it may change.
Yeah.
Does that? I hope that answers the question. If not, I'm happy to.
I think that answers the question. I learned engineering way back in the days of the waterfall project management discipline, where you didn't start building something until you had a product specification that was completely laid out in every detail.
Yeah.
And you look at the difference today, and you can look at the difference between uh, something that isn't strictly product software development, but look at the difference between Boeing Corporation and SpaceX Corporation in how they approach building systems to take human beings into orbit and beyond.
Yeah.
Boeing is from very much from the tradition of we get a government specification, we have to write everything out before we start putting
Yeah.
pen to paper on design. SpaceX is we'll build a rocket, and if it crashes, if it blows up, as long as nobody gets hurt, we
Yeah.
learn something from that, and we can
Precisely.
iterate it. And so it's a different world than the one I was born into.
Yeah.
But
No, I could relate to what you just said, Stuart. And also, I think the difference is about the time to build an aircraft. Of course, now it's already built and it's small evolutions rather than completely redesigned.
yeah,
Versus the time SpaceX took, right, is significantly different. Right? It was much smaller time frame, and that is because of this agility that you sort of described very nicely there.
yeah, and the interesting proof is that SpaceX has been delivering Dragon capsules to the International
Yeah,
Space Station for several years now, and
yeah,
Boeing just recently
yeah,
made its first successful test of the Starlink capsule. And
yeah,
you would think, based on the size and experience of the organizations, it would be completely opposite. So
correct.
yes, that bias to action and the agility and willingness to iterate
Yeah,
is very important. Um,
absolutely.
LCK asks a question about whether the COVID era has changed how you create products.
Uh, no, a very interesting question. I think to an extent, yes. And again, there are a lot of different views to it. And I'm saying mine is a view, a quick disclaimer. It's not necessarily backed by research or anything of that sort. It's just based on anecdotal experiences, right? I think it has, right? Of course, there are things about one of the significant things is around uh, inherently, right? I think working from home is a bit less structured than working from office, in the sense that how you approach things, right, has become a bit more agile and bit more unstructured, but yet focused, right? In the sense, like my org, for example, right, we do not have specified work hours per se, right? But then yet when I work or when my team works, they're really focused about this, and this sort of not enforcing rigid structures actually helping. I mean, it's actually working out very well. So that's one element of it. Second element, I think, is the talent pool, or because folks can work from anywhere. I think it has significantly improved the talent pool available. And what also happened was it forced companies, organizations to think different in terms of how we could collaborate, right? The
Yeah,
fact that coming to office is not necessary, I think was quite. There are exceptions, of course. Don't take this as a general statement. It has made way for some really a different way of working. A lot of companies are embracing this whole remote first, including like Cimpress actually is remote first, and a lot of other companies are doing it. And it's important to do it right. It's important to follow the right, essentially reimagine the way we work. So coming back to the original question, I think it has. In a way, it has fast tracked. If COVID had not happened, maybe we would have eventually stumbled upon something like this. But it has fast tracked the way work happens, and there are a lot of debates around whether it's the productivity has gone up or gone down and so on. My personal view, I think the productivity is great. There are certain things around, some of the in-person interactions are reduced, and there are some of the water cooler chats or some of the opportunity to mentor on the fly has reduced, which I think is on the negative side. But other than that, I think, yeah, my view is going great.
yeah. There used to be a expression management by walking around,
Yeah.
referring to how you'd be able to monitor and learn about what your subordinates are doing by wandering through their work areas and having chats with them. And
I,
you can't do that in a remote
yeah.
situation nearly as well.
Yeah, but it's really about giving up the illusion of control, right? I mean, what you described just now is an illusion of control that you exercise on your subordinates, and of course, in some situation it is necessary, but I think in general, right, that yeah, I visualize there is this movie called Office Space where the boss
Yes.
holds the mug and walks around the office. That's what I visualized when you were describing that, Stuart.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the meme everybody sees is with the boss looking over
Yeah.
edge of the cubicle and saying, it would be great if you could do this, right?
Exactly.
Um, uh, and he's always asking for something completely unreasonable. But we have a question from Edward, who says he's a terrible self-learner. How would you deal with a problem like that?
Oh, okay. I think the problem is in itself. What do you call it? The problem is identified in the statement, right? I think.
Mhm.
Uh, I think it's about yeah. I see your point. I think there is this inertia thing, right? I'll do it tomorrow, or procrastination and things like that. Uh, there's I would suggest you got to maybe just show bias to action there, right? Just start something small, right? And I think set some small objectives. It always helps to have some. I think some problem you're solving that typically fast tracks your learning rather than like if I had to learn something about data science, right? Maybe I'll do it, maybe I will not. But if I'm working on a problem that requires me to learn about data science, then it aligns well. So if you're not a self-starter, probably you could start the other way around where you commit to solving a problem that needs you to learn something. So it could be small, but that might be a way. But yeah, each everyone is different. It's a bit individualistic on how you approach it. But I think that's something that you might try.
Yeah. It also helps if you recognize that learning on your own is difficult for you. You can always look for situations where you can have a mentor, a guide, a coach, a
Yeah.
teacher. So it's one of the things. It's Simplilearn. We have courses that are available that are completely self-study, and then we have other courses where you're part of a cohort and getting live virtual classrooms so that you're interacting live
Yeah.
with the professor, you're able to interact with your peers and that type of thing. And it depends on your learning style and
Yeah.
what you need out of a course. Um, Niraj in our YouTube audience asks, which is more important, degree or knowledge when you're looking to get a job?
Degree or knowledge. A disclaimer: it's a personal opinion. So I think knowledge. Uh, yeah, again, it's a personal opinion. Degree in a way, right? It's usually the case, right? Degree is something. It's the problem is that you cannot. It's difficult to judge knowledge on its own, right? So degree is a sort of a standardized way to judge that you are capable of doing certain things, and I think that's as far as a degree goes. Beyond that, it's you, right? I mean, I think beyond certain stage, it's really about your knowledge. Of course, the degree would have helped. Even just a little thing around I hear about those in engineering schools talking about, hey, I had this 30 subjects, but I don't use a single one of them when I start working. So what it's probably a waste of time and so on. uh, it probably wasn't. Like, if you look at a very different analogy, right? You when kids learn about rhymes, like on the television. So the wheels on the bus, so old
Yeah,
MacDonald, and so on. We don't use it after a few years, right? There is no way we're going to that's helpful. But then at that stage, that was helpful for you to learn certain things. And it's a very similar kind of a thing when you're in a college. What it actually is telling you is, one, it's allowing you to try out different things. You are building a skill of learning things fast. It's very fast paced, right? In about 4 to 5 months, you need to learn about 6 subjects, give several exams about it, and so on. Even though the knowledge itself may or may not be useful, your ability to grasp things fast, your ability to learn things fast, is something that is very valuable. And you would apply that in your professional life. So that may be another perspective to think about, what you're doing in how things that you've done in the past is valuable to you.
and we have a number of related questions that have to do. We have Bargov, for example, is a lawyer who's already in a well-developed career, earning a good salary, but he's interested in transitioning to software development. And we have other people who are from mechanical background or a mathematical background, who are looking to move either into data science or into software development. So what advice do you have for someone who is working and wants to make that kind of a career pivot? What are some of the steps that they can take to do that?
I think there are a couple of things, right? I mean, if you, in fact, even today, right, for the majority, I have not spoken about technology. I haven't spoken about data science or learning about this, right? For the most part, I've spoken about certain behavioral traits or certain uh, things that you could embrace, which is irrespective of what your current background is, right? I think all these things anyone can pick it up. There will be certain things around, okay, how, like, the whole concept of a product and the software iterations is something that you probably need to understand if you do not have a background in that. And I think those are learnable, right? And and there are various ways. There are obviously all these really good courses and things like that. But yeah, I mean, just again, try and find yourself in a place where you can solve a real problem, right? It could be through internship, or it could be through uh, uh, under someone's mentorship, or it could be just something that you do on your own. And I think from a skill standpoint, that would be the way to transition. Uh, what I mean is, that would be the way to acquire those skills. The next bit of a challenge is around how do you, like, let's say you have a completely different background. How do you get a job in software, for example, right? Unfortunately, I do not think I have some really good advice to add there. I think it is going to be a bit of a hustle, but there are, it's definitely possible. I know of people who have done that. They've done it with different things, right? Again, it comes to about how you build your credibility. You in this case, you acquired those skills. You found a way to display those skills. You have tapped onto your network, and started with something small, and then built on it. So that's what I have seen people do it. But again, it's not an area where of my expertise, so I would defer to someone, the career transition part. The skill acquiring, I can talk more about it, but the
Yeah.
transition is a bit a nuance there. Yeah, it's possible for sure.
Yeah, and one of the challenges for people who are making a career pivot from an established career in whatever field into a new career in a different field is recognizing that you may end up taking a step back in terms of
Yeah,
seniority, salary, that type of thing, in order to get your foothold in the new career.
yeah,
But a lot of what you've learned from your experience can be translated into your
yeah.
management skills, your skills in the workplace, and that type of thing. So
Exactly. And one more thing
there's a
is also
balance
the
there.
domain, right? I think someone mentioned they're lawyer, right? And obviously,
Yeah,
they could bring in the domain expertise into the software. Like, you could, if not directly as a developer, you could enter as a domain expert through a product and then transition. That maybe I've seen that transition also happen. So yeah, yeah,
yeah. It's an interesting thing. A number of years ago, about 10, 15, maybe longer, um, a group of very famous lawyers in the United States, including people who represented O.J. Simpson in his trial, which was a big issue in the United States. But some of those lawyers got together and decided that there was an opportunity to create a self-service legal services for things like creating wills and trust documents and other kinds of standard agreements and that type of thing. So they formed a company called LegalZoom, and
yeah,
they came from the background of deep domain experience in the law.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and so gaining the skills in technology and crossing that with your skills in a domain can often be a very powerful way to create a new
yeah.
career and even a new business sometimes.
That makes sense.
Um,
And if I may relate to it, I think it's analogous to the problem, defining the problem space, right? Because you're in the
yeah,
domain, you understand the problem, and you found a niche problem that needs to be solved, and that is your entry point there. Right? Yeah, that is a good example there, Stuart.
thank you. Arton asks, where can one get experience with open source projects? Where are some of the places that you would direct people to participate in open source?
Um, I have seen people participate in the standard Apache open source projects. My There are a few members from my team who had done that. Like, when we are working on some problem and we found an issue of we raised a pull request in those projects and did that. I'm not quite sure like what do you mean by like I don't think I got the spirit of the question there.
I think that things like I think there's a firm Hacker Earth that allows people to find, participate in open source challenges, contribute their
Okay.
things like that. And I know that there are other, public forums
Yeah.
where people can, find an open source project that
Correct.
people are collaborating on, and they can join that team. And
Correct. I think my most of the time that my team members have collaborated is on the standard Apache projects, where again it's very similar to what you described, but the mechanism was more around. It is more around we are using the framework and we found ways to improve it, and so we put the pull request back. But yeah, I'm sure there are more proactive ways of contributing to that as well. Yeah.
we're a little over time, so I think that's the time for all the questions that we have. I want to apologize to everybody whose questions we could not get to, but you can always follow up with through me or directly with Raghavendra through his LinkedIn page, and I'm going to put that information up for you in just a second here. And actually, let me go ahead and get to the end. And so moving on, there is his LinkedIn. I'm going to put this into the chat so that you don't have to copy it off the screen, unless you're watching on the YouTube, in which case you do have to copy it off the screen. But for our live audience, all right, here we go. That's in the chat. And I wanted, again, to thank Raghavendra for a really excellent presentation, for a very informative and generous sharing of his knowledge. And we'll close by talking about one, people have asked about how you can become a developer. We do have a number of programs at Simplilearn. One of them is the Full Stack Java Developer Master's Program, which is something designed for people who have some knowledge and background in programming, a bit of work experience, and want to get into this field. It's a comprehensive 6-month online boot camp. It only takes about 10 hours a week or so. And it's one that covers a whole variety of tools and platforms. And it has live virtual classrooms, so you're not learning on your own. It's not a self-study program. It's a cohort-based study program that has a number of hands-on projects and integrated labs, allowing you to demonstrate your ability to use each of the skills you learn, and you culminate in a capstone project that takes all of those skills and puts them together in solving a business-related problem, building a web solution for a business-related problem. It also includes for people in India and the United States, various levels of job assistance to help you get into the field once you've completed the certificate program. So just have one question for this audience that we just want to get a basic temperature question on whether something of this nature is of interest to you. We'll just give you about 30 seconds or so to answer that. And if it is of interest to you, is this something that you'd like to start right away, or is this something that you see yourself doing sometime down the road? And Just leave this open for a few more seconds. And we'll close the poll, get your answers in. Excellent. And just to let you know how your peers answered, about 75% of the people responding said they would like to find out more about the program. And about 40% would like to do it sometime within the next few months. So you can do that by contacting me or by contacting askus@simplilearn.net. I'll put that email into the chat as well. And askus@simplilearn.net connects you to learning counselors who can answer everything about the program. And if you email me instead, then I'll just point you to them. So, and our next webinar in this series is 1 week from today. It is with Vijay Randrandram, who is a founder of Data That Matters LLC. He is a CDO, Chief Data Officer, and he is an expert in the field of data management and more than data management, data organization management. So for anyone who out there is is interested in becoming a chief data officer down the road, or if you know someone who is in that field, just want to put that into the chat as well. And we'd love to see you at that webinar as well. And last thing I'll put into the chat is a link to the full stack webpage. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you again, Raghavendra, for being so generous with your time and knowledge.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And with that, we invite everyone to follow us on our social channels at Simplilearn on Facebook, on Twitter, and Simplilearn on LinkedIn. And with that, let's conclude the webinar.